Is video podcasting the future? This episode is all about what you should consider if you're trying to launch a podcast on video format, or if you're considering transitioning from audio only to video podcasting on YouTube or live streaming. It's just one of those things that I'm going to be sharing my experience as a podcast producer for a pre-recorded show, live streaming, radio, to be honest, like we can throw that in there as well, but also as someone who launched their own show and is doing everything every single step of the way, and that is what you're probably doing as well. So I think that it will be a really big view into all the things that you have to consider. It will be very actionable as per usual. This podcast is imperfect, is practical, and is very actionable. I'm Nic Xavier, and this is the podcast space. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to go over 15 kind of lessons that I have learned through launching my own show, but also things that I've learned through my career and producing podcasts. Now, we're starting with the most obvious one, budget. Starting a video podcast is more expensive than doing an audio only. You have a camera that you may need. You may need to buy lights. You have to consider what the setting is. And once you start, it kind of feels like a little bit of a snowball. An audio only podcast, all you need really is a microphone and off you go. So if you're in a limited budget, you may want to hold off launching a video podcast. Number 2, everything just takes longer. You have to set up the camera, set up the lights, set up the microphone, position your table or your screen. Like for instance, my monitor, I have to slide it down, adjust my camera, adjust the light because I have glasses, and so it just shows if I don't leave the light in a specific position, it just shows on my lenses, so that's kind of annoying. So also a second thing is you normally have to set up kind of like some interesting makeup or attire. My hair is a little wild right now, but there's a lot of people that actually get like booking time at the hairdresser, and they batch like a whole episode day. Like they set up time to record 4 episodes in a month, or they have to set up clothes, and you have to like consider how does the clothes that you're wearing work with the background behind you. And you're doing a video podcast, you do not have the choice. You have to consider these things. But when you're doing an audio only, you can be in your pajamas for all you want, right? Like nobody sees that. And so that's just extra time that you have to put on the calendar. And then obviously editing. I'm going to be covering specifically why editing in video is different than audio, but it just takes longer. Exporting as well. Exporting a file that is audio only takes anything from a few seconds to maybe 5 minutes if your computer is really, really slow. But for video podcasting, my God, it can take anything from 30 minutes to 4 hours. It really depends. And, you know, if you only have one computer, that's it. You can't really reuse that computer for anything else, really. I'm realizing that my computer is also feels like it's about to lift off with the fan just like blowing out just so much air. So that will be post-production time that I'll have to set aside. And then obviously uploading to platforms. Uploading audio is just one platform, right? You go to your preferred hosting platform, you upload it there, you put the title, the description, and it's done. And you may want to add tags and all that. But like, again, if you're doing a video podcast, you have to add to your list YouTube or whatever platform you're using, like for instance, adding it to your website as well if you have a dedicated web page for the podcast. So if you're thinking about YouTube, also you have limiting characters on the title. You can only write 100 characters and then the title gets cut off. For writing, for instance, the description, you cannot hyperlink. So that kind of doesn't work. You have to take time to set up slightly differently. Those are the 2 main points. Then moving on to the third one, if you're just starting out, it's easier to master editing audio. And I will tell you that I've done miracles with guests that were really, really difficult to edit. Maybe they were lost, maybe they were nervous, maybe they kind of like went on a really long tangent and came back. And so I was able to put together a really amazing, cohesive, quick, tight episode. But when you're doing a video, when you're doing a video, the viewer can actually see where there's cuts. Very few. And again, in the beginning, when you're just starting out, it's just harder to craft a really polished video unless you rehearsed a lot of times. And even like I get rehearsed and I still mess it up in ways, but it is what it is. So it just takes a bit longer. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with all the steps, just go ahead and just try audio first. And then when you're good enough, confident enough with editing, confident enough with hosting, you can transition to video. And then another thing is that, for instance, video requires a different skill set than audio. I was always very aware that obviously when you're doing a video, ideally you want to look at the camera lens like I'm doing right now. When you're doing a podcast, you can literally look at anywhere. You can lay in your bed and record your podcast. But for a video podcast, you have to be aware of your body positions. For instance, I can't just be super, super low because it's going to look weird, right? Like I can't have my forehead cropped. So I can't be hunching. Ideally, you don't also want to hunch on a regular podcast because it will affect the quality of your speaking. But on video format, it really, really shows. But if you want to improve your public speaking skills, if you want to get more confident establishing contact with like a specific area, like the lens, like I'm looking at it right now, that's a phenomenal way to get confident. But also at the same time, that's actually one of the things that when you're applying for conferences and speaking opportunities and masterminds and masterclasses and stuff like that, if someone has a video podcast, it really showcases who you are as a speaker. And again, if you don't have a ton of editing, a lot of chops in between, it is really easy for the person watching the video to understand what type of confident speaker you are. If you are shy, if you're not shy, like it really shows. So I think you have to consider that. If you're really confident in audio format and you want to push it a little further on your skill set, well, then absolutely try video, because I will tell you that to me it was such a different experience. Hosting and coaching clients on doing video podcasts, video live streaming and all of that. I was like, okay, look at the camera, talk to the camera. And if you need me, I'm here in the production room next to you. It's such a different skill set because you got to think, and you're not just thinking on what you're saying. You're thinking, what am I saying? And how am I looking at the camera? Am I looking like I am engaging with the lens or with you, the viewer? So again, as I'm saying, a ton of things to consider. For instance, I have like my notes in here right below the camera. So it's just positioning. I can't position it to the side. I have to position it right below it so that I can easily like talk between right underneath the camera and looking at you in the camera. And now we're moving into number 5. Video helps with discoverability. Not only just on YouTube, but also on Google. And this is something that not enough people know. And there's like a little bit of a difference that I want to talk about it here. So YouTube is owned by Google. And that's why when you're doing a Google search, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, okay. That's why video is preferred on Google searches, because it's the same company. But at the same time, something else that you have to consider is that when you are uploading content to your website, you should always have multimedia pieces. And that's one reason why your page may rank lower or higher. Of course, there's the content. There's a ton of other things. But one of the things that Google looks at is the more multimedia elements there are on the page, the better it will rank, because it's just like, oh, this is an interesting page for someone searching for this information, because there's variety. And so if you can embed a YouTube video on a page alongside that player and then the show notes and links, you're gold. And on YouTube itself, let's think for a moment how long you've been using YouTube for, right? You probably would search for something on YouTube first. You wouldn't search on the social media networks that you're using today, right? And you are already primed to search for results, and you don't care about who it is that is talking, right? You have a question and you want the answer for that. So what you're going to click is a video that has a ton of views, or a video that by the title and description seems to be the one that matches the answer the best, right? And when you're looking on podcast platforms, that's not how you use the platform at all, right? When you're looking on a podcast platform, you're looking for someone who you have already known. And on YouTube, you're just looking for anyone. But also on YouTube, you have the benefit of YouTube Shorts, which is kind of YouTube's response to TikToks and Instagram Reels. And so it's short video format. Normally it's considered around like, I think 1.5 minutes or under 2 minutes. And when you upload content, so let's say already you're creating content on Instagram or TikTok, you can repurpose those videos into YouTube or cut multiple teasers from your episode and upload them to YouTube. And whenever someone is watching that short format content, they will already be served the equivalent of that in long form. So if you're scrolling through YouTube Shorts and you come across a short video, like a teaser from my podcast, and you like it and you engage with it, you will be seeing my podcast on the desktop. You will be suggested my podcast. So even if you don't subscribe to my content, you will be able to be suggested. So can you see that the one platform that does not require anyone else to move outside of the platform, they're already using it. So someone seeing your short form content and converting into a listener way faster. All right. And then number 6, if your listeners are visually driven and your podcast is about things that need to be shown, of course, you need to consider a podcast. I feel this feels very obvious, but again, there are people that do not have the skill set, so they create an audio podcast to describe things, and then they're like, you know what? Like, it would be fun to create some podcast episodes where we're actually doing visuals. I love visuals. I love interior design, so it was a no-brainer for me to include a podcast that would have like a really fun setting. And again, I don't do a lot of post-production, but if you want to do a lot of post-production with like graphics and elements that are really hard to follow along on audio format, that's great to use, right? And then it helps you get more subscribers faster. I know that this sounds like, Anna, what do you mean? Because they are, it's the one platform, right? It's not that you're on Instagram telling people to go and listen to your podcast. They're already within the platform. They're more likely to follow your show. I was testing, obviously. So I experienced a lot of growth in December, even though I wasn't really doing a lot. I posted a lot of short format content and I got a lot of followers. And again, it just shows that I'm not engaging. I'm literally just posting. So if you're someone who does not like spending time on social media, you can use that to get a ton of followers faster. But again, you have to decide like, okay, it has to align. The short form content has to align with the podcast. So you can't just like upload photos of your puppy and then do a podcast about, executive coaching and expect people that watch puppies are 1,000% going to be aligned with that coaching content. So think about that. And YouTube and YouTube podcasts have great analytics. This is reason number 8 that you should have a video podcast, to be honest, or should consider, because on podcast hosting platforms, the data isn't very accurate. You can't specifically see and play the time when someone stopped listening, and you can on YouTube podcasts. So you can do all of that, but also it gives you incredible data about the demographics of where they are located, what's their age, interests, and it shows you where they came from. So for instance, it shows, okay, this person found this video on the search page or through recommended content or, a website. Like, it really tells you a lot of information that most podcast platforms don't give you. All right, number 9, someone that isn't a native speaker to the language that you're speaking really benefits from seeing you talking and having the captions underneath your video. So I actually received an email from one of my listeners, and she was sharing. She was so cute. She was like, I finally was able to see you, to watch the content without subtitles. And I feel like this is an achievement. And it felt so awesome because, again, like, for instance, my audience is all around the world. I know that they're based in France, England, sure, they speak English, but Portugal, where I'm originally from, Mexico, Serbia, Australia. I'm just going through the numbers. I don't think Spain, but again, these are people that some of them are native speakers, some aren't. And so having the captions, having like, I'm covering my mouth right now on the microphone, but you can see me talk, and that really, really helps connect deeper, but also it doesn't leave anyone behind. And of course, accessibility. So if you don't have the time to create a transcript for your show, YouTube will fix that for you. So it's absolutely great to consider it. Number 11, it's that actually it boosts your image. Just for all the reasons we were talking about before, right? It's way easier to start an audio podcast than a video podcast. And I want you to really take a minute to think about how many people in your industry have a video podcast. And it legitimizes you as a thought leader. It legitimizes your confidence if you're trying to be a public speaker. It just showcases your ability to connect with people. So that's hugely important if you're trying to raise the awareness. And again, we connect with humans, and if they can see a face, they can connect deeper with you. Also, a lot of people are turned off by podcasting, and it's kind of on the flip side. You may struggle to get guests. I know that in specific industries, people just do not want to be on video, and that means that it could be an issue getting them on your video podcast. They may say no, they may ignore your emails. I'm talking about situations that actually happened. And so it just isn't something that you can ignore, right? Like you can't just say, oh, well, they'll just do it for me, because there's people that have insecurities, people that just don't want, or just like in an industry, they just have this perception of, oh, video is like slimy, or video is like daunting, or I can't look like this, especially if they have a lot of personal confidence issues. They may struggle to be on camera, and you may struggle to be on camera as well. I'm just going to briefly say that like I have strabismus, which is one of the eyes just sometimes is not looking at the same position where the other one is. And 3 years ago, and I'm going to do an episode just on this, but 3 years ago, if you had told me like, oh, Anna, will you ever have a video podcast? I'll just absolutely not. No. I'm behind the scenes. I'm behind the camera. I don't do this, right? And now I do, because I've built my confidence on creating short form content on my phone, on stories. I built my confidence to then do a video podcast, and I'm doing this. And again, 3 years ago, I probably would have said, no, maybe I don't want to be invited on a show. But now I'm like, yes, let's do this, right? The irony of being a producer for live stream and video live streaming and say, no, I don't want to. But, it is what it is. And then number 13, you actually can have more sponsorship opportunities if you do a video podcast. And that is something that not enough podcasters think about, but that in the industry has been talked about time and time again, where big brands talk about how much interest they have when a podcaster says, yes, I do have a video podcast. Yes, I have some sort of like ability to showcase your product on my community, because instead of just talking about the product on audio format, you're able to either showcase it either in the background behind you, or actually like place it in front of the camera and talk about it like just there, right in there, right? So if you're thinking, I want to start considering sponsorships, then you could get a higher amount and be more interesting for brands. And then number 14, video is becoming essential in a podcaster's strategy. And if you don't believe me, just go online. It's just everything is video. And you can choose to run away, or you can choose to face forward and say, how do I want to do this? How can I incorporate video in a way that feels exciting and fun and safe for me? One of the things that I want to talk about as well is that this podcast barely has any post-production. I do very rough cuts, because I know that if I was to do a lot of elements, a lot of like graphs, a lot of like text, overlays, footage, I just would not be able to create these podcasts on a weekly basis. And honestly, I think it wouldn't excite me at all. So I'm just not doing that. So I chose to do it in this format, which is way more relaxed. And I think that it's important to do what, you enjoy. And then eventually, if I want to hire an editor, or if I want to add specific episodes where I actually want to add more post-production to it, I will just do that. And obviously on social media, video is just being really pushed by every platform's algorithm anyway. And one of the things that I teach in my course, Maximize Your Podcast Content, is exactly how you can maximize the content that you are already creating. So instead of thinking, what the heck am I gonna be crafting this week for social media, you can really use this podcast, your podcast, in order to feed everything in your online ecosystem. So I guide you through potential things, how to repurpose content, what you need to consider, how you need to consider creating content depending on your personality. So if you want to check that out, it's available at thepodcastspace.com/course, or the link will be in the show notes, because I think that a lot of people just think like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make sense of all of this? And I was like, hang on, I've done this for ton of clients. I'm doing this for myself as well. And honestly, if I can do it, you can do it. I believe you can, because it's just about finding the right way to craft content, and especially align it with your goals. Because if your podcast is working for you, I mean, you can create as many or as little episodes you can and you want during the week, but it's really about finding that balance. So moving on to the last one, number 15, you can actually get a video podcast without video. Oh, I know. Basically, you really can start dipping your toes into benefiting from YouTube's algorithm, YouTube's search engine optimization, and help you rank higher on Google with just a static image and an audio file that can be exported using something like Headliner or the script. And I can tell you that actually works. One of our clients, all we do is really have her content that is the static image and the audio, and goes directly to YouTube. There's nothing else, and she still gets a few hundred plays. I was like, it's not downloads, plays per episode. So it still works with minimal work, by the way. So if you want to try that, you can do that. And then another one is using a short intro, which I've done in the past. It's called Podcasting on the Go. If I'm not mistaken, is episode 9. And I created that podcast to showcase how you can actually do that. And that is to create a video intro and then just have your, music, whatever it is. And then right away go into a podcast that isn't video. And then you can have the typical side-by-side image. So let's say you're doing a podcast on Zoom. You can have both participants, both people in the frame throughout the whole thing. And again, build your confidence. I've done that with my episode with Nic Redman. It was episode 11. And because I didn't have enough time to edit, do a really fancy thing where I'm talking, and then Nick's talking, and then I'm talking again, and then we're both talking. I didn't have the time for any of that. So what I did was just I took the recording from Riverside. It was just side by side, a grid, and off we go. And so that's what you need to really assess. How can I get this episode out? And for me, it was doing that. So yeah, I think that this closes the show. I would love to hear if you're considering doing a video podcast, if this podcast episode helped you, get it one step closer, or if you're by now thinking, nope, video is not for me, but I want to focus my efforts on growing my podcast, being more present on social media, maybe guesting on other podcasts. And so if that's the case, kudos to you. You just do what is right for you. And then whenever the time comes, if you're considering upgrading or moving forward with another strategy, I'm always here. You can talk to me mainly on Instagram. It's the podcast space. So just the handles will be right in the description of this video. But I will say that also, if you want more resources, more pro tips, links to everything that I mentioned in the episodes, you can go on the description below or thepodcastspace.com/podcast and search for this episode, which is episode number 12. That's actually where I add a lot of things that I most times forget about. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So you should always go and check it out. But yeah, I think that I just want to hear from you, what was your biggest aha and what you're trying. All right, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week.